encyclopedia.zone. My name is Dr. Don Jolly, the editor-in-chief of the internet's premier home for literary shitposting, and that is at encyclopedia.zone. If you point your browser there right now, you can find, fresh off the presses, as we speak, just going up, our latest update, the Quarantine Fun Zone. This is a feature-length, novel-sized annual update. Not that it's going to happen once a year. I'm saying it's big, like a comic book annual. This is a massive update featuring comics, poetry, shit posts, short stories, and anything else we can think of on the subject of either the COVID-19 epidemic and subsequent quarantine, or anything except for the quote COVID-19 epidemic, subsequent quarantine. There are more contributors for this update than I can easily list in the beginning of this video. We will be featuring more of the update on the channel as we move forward, but go check it out. Quarantine Fun Zone, live now at encyclopedia.zone. And if you like what we're doing on the channel and on the website, you can support us at patreon.com/HRC2020. Also, we are coming up on a very auspicious day very soon. I'm not going to give an exact date. We are going to have a full playable demo for Isle Diver, The Pages of Truth. This is a 3D roguelike RPG, kind of in the mold of Diablo 2, where you take the role of an adorable little anime girl going beneath the secret pedophile sex temple on Jeffrey Epstein's island, and you fight devious monsters and massive bosses, and also have to read actual court documents related to the Jeffrey Epstein case in order to level up. This has been a project that's been worked on for many, many months by a incredibly industrious and intelligent and genuine, beautiful man named Salient Abdicant. It's his own community project, and he has started a Patreon to help assist in the development as we go, not just through the completion of this demo, but through the completion of the eventual full game. So if you go to patreon.com/interactive-zone, you can support Isle Diver, The Pages of Truth. You can read devlogs and updates, which Salient has been putting up there, and I guarantee you it is worth the price of admission. There's going to be some new writing from me in this game very, very soon. So go over to Interactive Zone on Patreon, patreon.com/interactive zone. Support Isle Diver, The Pages of Truth, and we're going to make this the best year in Zone history. Also, the only year in Zone history so far, because we just launched at the end of the summer. Anyway, crude oil is currently in negative value right now. Apparently Amazon and its subsidiary Whole Foods is using body heat to track its employees and prevent them from unionizing. Man, there's so much interesting shit to talk about. Alex Jones drove a fucking armored personnel carrier in front of the Texas Capitol to protest the COVID-19 shutdowns. There's been a sweep of protests all across the country as people collect in front of their state capitals, their municipal capitals, to protest the lockdown and the quarantine, which is now entering its 5th week here in Austin, Texas. I'm assuming it's around there for other parts of the country, because everybody's out of work. More than half of Americans under 45 are furloughed or have lost their jobs. More than 6 million people are added to the unemployment rolls. I'm assuming that number is even higher now. 40,000 people have died of coronavirus. We have 729,000 people infected as of Sunday, the 19th. And yeah, I'm talking about Bernie fucking Sanders. I'm talking about this old rancid cuck. Why am I doing that? Well, essentially it comes down to this. I need to comprehend what happened with regard to the Sanders campaign. I need to be able to operate in the future to adjust my political operations. I need to prepare for political eventualities. And I need to euthanize my sense of despair in regards to my preferred political candidate of the cycle completely eating shit. In other words, we're engaging Operation COPE or COPE. That's Operation COPE. So yeah, I've been standing Bernie Sanders, to use the Twitter parlance, from the beginning of the cycle all the way through to now. He dropped out right after the Minnesota, excuse me, not Minnesota. He dropped out right after the Wisconsin primary. That would be on the 8th. That was the day after the Wisconsin primary, the 8th of April. Bernie Sanders officially said that he is ceasing campaigning for the presidency. It's not a complete halt because he is still on the ballot in states that have yet to vote. And because of the COVID-19 thing, a lot of states have delayed their primaries. So there's places where you're still going to be able to vote for Bernie Sanders, and he would encourage you to do so because the Sanders campaign hopes to get as many delegates as possible in hopes of swinging the Biden campaign platform, because Joe Biden, of course, former vice president, is now the presumptive Democratic nominee. He is also allegedly a digital rapist, but, you know, that's never stopped a presidential candidate before. So Bernie's hoping to push him to the left. He's hoping to get him to adopt some policy positions. And, you know, Biden has already started courting Sanders voters with some incredibly progressive policies, such as lowering the age of enrollment in Medicare from 65 to 60 and offering student loan forgiveness for kids who went to state schools. And there's, of course, an income cutoff for it. I myself accrued graduate school debt, which, thanks to Joe Biden's bankruptcy bill, I cannot discharge through either death or bankruptcy. So that doesn't help me specifically. But, you know, fuck me, right? Because I can't even get my Trump bucks because I was off the books. I was living in an off the books situation last year, taking money under the table in cash to make my way, and I did not file income taxes, so I don't have a 2018 file to get my my one-time $1,200 tax advance, which is supposed to last me for the next 10 weeks. I can't get that. And also, I can't file my 2019 tax return because one of the Chinese-owned grocery stores that I've worked for in the last year has not given me my W-2. So... Oh, and I can't file for unemployment either because technically I'm not employed by my employer. I'm employed by a staffing company, and if I try to file for unemployment, they will fire me. And I'm talking about Bernie Sanders. So yeah, Bernie Sanders is no longer running for president. Dropped out on the 8th of April, and then about a week later, I believe on the 13th or 14th. I think it was 13th. He got on a live stream and endorsed Joe Biden. Barack Obama. God, I love that. Barack Obama. He endorsed Joe Biden the next day, also on a live stream. And here we are. In that live stream where Bernie endorsed him, Biden promised that he would have one of the most progressive administrations since Roosevelt. And... you know, lowering Medicare from 65 to 60. Wow. I mean, Roosevelt, you know, he nationalized large amount of American industry in order to produce material for the war effort. He had the Federal Theater Project, massive spending in arts and infrastructure, basically created the modern regulatory state, which has had positive and negative consequences. But, yeah, I don't think he would have gone so far as to lower the age of Medicare, to lower Medicare eligibility from 65 to 60. That's commie talk. Joe Biden is flirting with radicalism here. But yeah, I mean, in terms of what this represents, like, I've been standing Sanders pretty hard. You know, I agree with a lot of his policies. I do think that we should have universal health care in this country. I do think that there needs to be student loan forgiveness for personal reasons. And in general, I just think that we've been making, you know, and I've said this throughout our updates about the COVID thing, we've been making a lot of short-term fucking decisions, and we need to start looking at the society that we actually live in, and we need to start making some alterations to it to provide essentially a decent life for the people that are getting completely fucked and destroyed in American society. I thought that under Obama, it was part of the reason why in 2016 I voted for Donald Trump. Not because I thought Donald Trump would deliver on any of those policies, but I thought that we were in this lockstep where both of the parties were advocating essentially the same positions. Like, we had Barack Obama swept in 2008 on this essentially promises of being an antithesis of George W. Bush. And then we saw an absolute continuation of Bush-era policies all the way through the Obama administration, except now the press was in love with it. I was disgusted with the political parties as they exist, and Donald Trump was a hand grenade. You know, he was this agent of chaos who would get up on the stage and say, all these people are assholes, and it was fucking hilarious. I mean, come on. He brought Bill Clinton's sexual assault accusers to a presidential debate. I voted for Donald Trump to see the look on Bill Clinton's face when he looked over and saw fucking Paula Jones in the audience of that debate. And you've seen that picture, that fucking, yeah. Of course, it was juvenile, it was stupid, but, you know, I felt pretty, I felt like my hands were tied in terms of American national electoral politics. I didn't feel like there was a tremendous amount that could be done other than to lob a fucking very disruptive grenade into the center of things. Bernie Sanders was different. Like, in 2016, I was in a cynical enough space to vote for Donald Trump. And also, I was, you know, living in a warehouse in New York with no running water. Well, there was running water. It wasn't a faucet. It was like hose. There's no toilet, but there was running water. I was living off the fucking grid. I wasn't paying bills. I wasn't doing anything. I had dropped out of society. And from that position, from that point of view, there's really not a lot of reason to buy into anybody's bullshit because you're already on the fucking bottom. So what the hell, right? So from that perspective, like, a hand grenade seemed like a pretty good thing to throw. In 2016, I thought Bernie Sanders was a complete fucking fraud because obviously in New York, I knew a lot of people that were, you know, Sanders heads. And I said from the beginning, like, you know, this guy, he's like George McGovern, he's like Eugene McCarthy. Like, there's no way he gets through the primary process, both because of his inability or unwillingness to run the no-holds-barred style campaign that would be necessary to win, and there's absolutely no way he could stand up in the general. So I saw the amount of enthusiasm that he was engendering and his fundraising operation, which, like, in 2016, same as 2020, his fundraising operation is unprecedented. He made the most money of any Democratic candidate in 2020, and he had a very, like, if it wasn't for, you know, certain big bundlers that came behind Clinton, he would have made more money than her in 2016. And he did that on the back of small dollar donations. Like, Bernie Sanders really squared a circle in terms of campaign finance. He figured out a way to make this sort of anti-corporate or non-corporate campaign pay out. And that's important. Like, it's not just about him, you know, being a charlatan. That's an important piece of figuring out how to have anti-corporatist or non-corporatist. Let's just say non-corporatist. I won't even go so far to say anti-corporatist. But one of the big pieces as to, like, why we are in the political situation that we are in, especially on the national level, is that in order to mount a national campaign, you need such staggering amounts of money that you basically have to play in the realm of American corporatism to raise the necessary funds. Sanders figured out a very important thing, which is how to play in that arena with small dollar donations. And, you know, to his credit, it worked even better in 2020. And it shows that there is, like, a pathway forward for these sorts of politics on the national level, except we're going to get into that. Anyway, I saw him as a fraud in 2016, and I felt bad for the people that were taken in by it because I was like, there's no way this guy is legitimately running for president. I actually changed my position on that this year. Like, in 16, I saw him being so conciliatory with Hillary Clinton, especially in the debates prior to Christmas in 2015, where he was saying, we've heard enough about your damn emails. He was being, you know, really nice to his opponent. I was like, oh, okay, this guy is token opposition. He's here to push Hillary a little bit to the left. And actually, Hillary is to the left of Joe Biden on her Medicare proposal because she was going to lower the age of eligibility to 50. So maybe Bernie did that semi-successfully. But I saw him as token opposition, and, you know, he was giving people all this false hope that there was going to be some kind of massive political realignment. And then the meme that you're seeing over here went into effect as soon as he got fucked at the convention. And it was, we're going to destroy the establishment. Oops, I lost. All your money goes to the establishment. Vote for the establishment. So that's how I saw Barney Sanders, back in 2016. And I maintained that point of view all the way up until the spring of last year. The spring of last year, like I said, in 2016 when I was voting for Trump, I was completely out of mainstream society. I was living on the fucking ragged edge. I was living a cyberpunk hobo. Posting on 8chan was my only succor. Like, I was fucking very far from any kind of rational shore. And it's necessary sometimes to go a little bit crazy. You gotta go out from shore so that you can see things maybe a little bit more objectively. And also, like I said, when you're living in the wilderness, there's no reason to suffer anybody's bullshit. So, of course, like, the hope of Bernie Sanders meant nothing to me then. So when did I start to care? When did I start buying into the Bernie Sanders campaign? Basically, over the summer, and all this autobiographical detail is going to pay off. I'm sorry if I'm boring you with it, but trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. In summer of 2020, I'd been so poor for so long, I decided I'm going to get my shit together. I'm going to, fucking move back down to Texas where the rents are lower, as opposed to New York. And I'm going to get a fucking government job. I'm going to get a photo ID again. I'm going to start paying taxes, and I'm going to be on a very low level of our American civilization, but I'm going to buy in. I'm going to buy in because if I keep living on the street or adjacent to the street in New York City, it's going to fucking kill me. So, picked up stakes, started the Encyclopedia Zone. We're all going to make it, bros. That's the message. It was a message of hope. It was a time of hope, but it was also a time of, at least on some level, buying back into a system that I had fundamentally rejected years before. Now, the big goal, I've been writing about this campaign, the primary campaign. The big goal is to do basically a sociology of religion project, to examine American political life as a religious institution, a religious expression, which is the most vital and important religious expression in all of our lives. And when I rejoined society, when I got my fucking photo ID, I got into the Texas DPS, and I was credentialed once again as an official human being, a taxpayer, an American citizen, because I was, kind of not for a while there. When I got credentialed, I bought in, not just officially, but also on some level spiritually. And so I started looking at the primary, and you see Bernie Sanders making these policy proposals that I agree with. I need health care. I look at my friends, they need health care. Everybody that I know in my generation is on their back fucking foot. Like, we're saddled with student loan debt. I'm speaking for myself and for practically everybody else I know. We're saddled with student loan debt. We've never been able to save money. We get paid shit. We have no fucking opportunities. And the jobs that are available to us are fucking embarrassing nightmares. I mean, like, the best job that I ever had in my life was working as a movie projectionist in a theater that is closed now because it has been shut down due to a viral outbreak. This was in fucking high school. That's the job where I got paid the most consistently. That's the job where I got treated with the most respect. That's one of the only jobs I've had where my boss won't occasionally just tell me, like, look, we can't afford to pay you right now, but we really appreciate it if you just keep working. That happened a lot in the writing game, by the way. Except not at Penthouse Magazine. Always got treated very respectfully at Penthouse Magazine. And I got treated very respectfully at a number of other magazines, too. I'm not trying to imply anything nasty about the people that I've worked for, because I want to work for them again. But, well, maybe not. Anyway, the point is, I bought back in to the system a little bit. And this, this interfered with my plans. Not consciously, but unconsciously, it interfered with my plans to come in and have this hyper cynical take on the election, because, like, look, you've got this guy making policy proposals that I agree with, but, like, let's elide that for a second. Making policy proposals. You want to do something interesting? Compare Pete Buttigieg's announcement speech to Bernie Sanders' announcement speech. Pete Buttigieg is talking about light. He's talking about hope. He's talking about changing the day, you know, bringing on the future. You look at Joe Biden's announcement speech, redeeming the soul of America. Donald Trump is this unprecedented threat that we got to put down. He's not talking about policy. Buttigieg isn't talking about policy. Amy Klobuchar in her announcement speech, I mean, when she recounts that story, she primarily just says that it happened while it was snowing. Like, we've known for a while, especially anybody who voted for Trump, like, Trump is anti-policy. You ask 3 different people what Trump's policies are on any given thing, they're not going to know, because his policies are a confusing morass of whatever the audience in front of him wants to hear. If you talk to libertarians, they think Trump is libertarian Trump voters, I should say, or libertarian leading Trump voters. They think Trump is basically a libertarian, and that everything he says that doesn't fit with that point of view is essentially just something he's adopted for political expediency. If you talk to hardcore evangelicals, they see Trump as representing their values, and everything else that he represents is a matter of political expediency. Like, Trump is all things to all people because he makes no policy proposals. He just presents an attitude and an image. And it's, you know, it's become like a completely, cliche thing at this point to say that politics is wrestling. Politics is all about this media performance. And this is something that I focus on a lot. But in the post-Trump world, like, okay, you know, we did it. Peds, we fucking got Donald Trump in there. We threw a hand grenade into the White House press corps. The mainstream media, the corporatist media has been melting down for 4 fucking years, going increasingly schizophrenic over increasingly tenuous stories like this Russiagate thing, portraying Donald Trump as this massive, you know, existential threat to the existence of not just American society, but like civilization as a whole, which is like overstating it to a ridiculous degree, because he's basically just like every other president that we've had in our lifetimes, in my lifetime anyway, with the exception of the fact that he's like, his flavor is reality television show, as opposed to like Obama was late night talk show. Bill Clinton was actually a different flavor of late night talk show. He was like, you know, he's playing the saxophone on Arsenio Hall. And you know, the Ronald Reagan was a movie star. He was a big screen fella. Basically, we're just flipping television channels here. We're changing an aesthetic. It's not an existential threat. But, you know, we've got this situation where things are fucking melting down. We see massive turnout in the 2018 midterms. So the Democratic base is highly mobilized. It's really looking like if you could just get somebody through the primary, you get a bag of flour through the primary, there's a chance that it could beat Donald Trump if his base is relatively depressed. At the beginning of the year, I was like the beginning of 2020. Once again, I'm in Austin. I'm doing pretty well for myself. I'm making a little bit of money, making some videos on the zone, feeling very comfortable. You know, I got enough money for hardback books. I got my copy of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, a wonderful epic of magic and enchantment that I'm reading before bed. So, you know, I'm pretty comfortable. I'm starting to think there might be something to Sanders this time. I start looking into him. And once again, I'm seeing, you know, and I'm seeing that he's talking about policy. He's not like these other people. He's actually got an agenda of things that he wants to get done. The criticism of Sanders at this point, because the things that he wants to get done are actually broadly popular. Like, one of my favorite things to do is look at the Washington Post exit polls from South Carolina, because South Carolina was the moment, it was the moment where the knife went in to the Sanders campaign. Excuse me, I've got COVID-19. But the knife went into the Sanders campaign's ribs in South Carolina. This was the state that voted immediately before Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday, of course, after South Carolina, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar dropped out, clearing the pathway for Joe Biden to like get a massive win on Super Tuesday. And, Barack Obama was there behind the scenes ensuring Pete Buttigieg that he would never have more leverage than he has now. This is something that's been widely reported that Obama told Buttigieg right before the latter dropped out. Presumably he's going to try to angle for a cabinet position or something with Biden. Bernie's not going to get that. No fucking way. He's not even on the task force, the policy task force that's addressing his fucking concerns, supposedly. Anyway, it's embarrassing how bad Bernie Sanders got fucking blown out over the last couple of weeks. It's embarrassing. Hence Operation Cope. Anyway, fucking, in South Carolina, this moment where the knife went into the ribs of the Bernie Sanders campaign, you can actually see that, Medicare for All, his signature policy proposal, 44% of people who voted for Biden were in favor of Medicare for All. Only 29% of people in South Carolina who supported Medicare for All voted for Bernie Sanders. There's a real disconnect here. This is the guy's signature policy proposal. It's all he fucking talks about. Joe Biden, on the other hand, was running a schizophrenic campaign with no real message aside from redeem the soul of America and beat Trump. That's it. But these people who were in agreement with Bernie Sanders, the policy guy, on his central policy, did not vote for him. They backed Biden. Now, the explanation for this, also going to the South Carolina exit polls, is do you want to nominate a candidate who agrees with you on the issues or who can beat Trump? And, 52% of people who said they wanted a candidate who could beat Trump voted for Biden in South Carolina. But 43% of people who said they want a candidate who can agree with them on the issues voted for Biden in South Carolina. Only 17% of people who said they wanted to beat Trump primarily voted for Bernie Sanders, and only 24% of people who said they want a candidate who agrees with them on the issues voted for Bernie Sanders. Now, it would be interesting to see how many of those people who say that they want someone who agrees with them on the issues are also people who agree with Medicare for All. The implication is that there would be some overlap here just because the raw percentage is involved. But the point is, it's not as easy as saying it's just about people thinking that Bernie isn't going to be able to enact his policies or that he's not going to be able to beat Donald Trump in the fall. Bernie Sanders failed with people who were voting primarily for someone who agrees with them on the issues, and more than likely they were voting for somebody who did not in fact agree with them on the issues. Bernie Sanders' whole aesthetic is American society, especially the American economy, is fundamentally broken, and it needs a complete overhaul. It needs major change. This is my favorite piece of data from the South Carolina exit polls, but they asked the people who are voting in South Carolina whether the U.S. economic system, and here were the choices, works well, needs major change, or needs complete overhaul. 53% of people said needs complete overhaul, 36% of people said needs major change, and there weren't enough respondents who said that it works well to be statistically significant. Of the 53% of people in this exit poll that said the U.S. economy needs a complete overhaul, which obviously dovetails very well with Bernie Sanders' aesthetic and basic messaging, 49% of them voted for Joe Biden. I talk about in my piece HRC 2020, which I'm actually going to be expanding and working on some more in the days ahead. I talk about how this is the information ecosystem of television sort of shut Sanders out. If you're getting your news from television, sort of Biden is the only game in town, and no matter where you stand on the issues, no matter how you see yourself as attached to a candidate, the only one that you're hearing anything really significant about is Joe Biden or Amy Klobuchar or whatever. The people that are not Bernie Sanders who, just I think a week, maybe 2 weeks before South Carolina, had been reported in the Washington Post, who was responsible for this exit poll, as being supported by Russia. being basically a Russian plant within the electoral system. He got Russiagated, and he did not push back on it. He didn't push back on the essential premise, which is something that, you want to talk about a guy who's like really rolling with the punch of this Sanders thing? Michael Tracy is just going after him every fucking day for the weaknesses of his campaign, and this is a major one. That he did not respond to being Russiagated with sufficient aggression. He did not deny it. He did not deny the basic premise. He just kind of rolled with it because he was essentially being a nice guy, the way that he was to Hillary Clinton in the early part of the 2016 race before he really got the idea that he could win. Anyway, the point is, this isn't a failure of, like, we can go in forever to the question of what the Sanders campaign did wrong, what the tactical missteps were. Was he insufficiently patriotic? Did he allow himself to get Russiagate? I mean, Michael Tracy is just doing piece after piece after piece, and there's a million postmortems out there. I mean, Kantbot's been making fun of it on Twitter. He's been saying Bernie Sanders is a chump. What else do you need to know? And that's, there's an element of truth in that, because, it doesn't really matter what tactical misstep was made here. It's the thing that's more interesting is why people are so interested in finding the tactical misstep, in saying like, oh no, if we'd only done this or we'd only done that, then Sanders could have gone through and he could have advanced these policies into the front of the Democratic ticket. Like I said, by Christmas 2019, the beginning of the actual primary campaign in 2020, I was on the Sanders bus because I was living, I was a little bit more stable. I was looking for hope. I was looking for something to believe in. I thought, you know what? Like, look, if the guy loses, I'm not going to lose anything by being a little bit optimistic and, putting my money where my mouth is and phone baking a little bit, trying to make this thing happen, man. Because I agree with the policies. I think that even if he's not capable of implementing them, because then I really didn't encounter that many people who were like against Sanders' policies, especially like working class people who run in my circles. What I did encounter was people that were skeptical about whether he would be able to implement them. And this is where, James Armstrong was the co-host of the political shows that we've been doing this year. That's sort of essentially where he fell. And I had that skepticism. It's not that I thought that Bernie Sanders was going to get in and he was going to be able to enact this entire slate of policy proposals. I just thought that it was important to have these issues at the front of the ticket, to have them be the things that we were all talking about, to make this the wall, to make Medicare for all his, border wall. This like big symbolic gesture that we're all going to talk about. And maybe, who knows, maybe we get the House and the Senate back. Maybe there's some way to do, or maybe we get the Senate back. Maybe there's, when I say we, I'm talking about the Democratic Party. Ugh, that's a terrible slip of the tongue. Because I'm not I change my party affiliation whenever I feel like. I vote tactically. I vote for a particular reason. Like I said, with Donald Trump, I was voting to throw a hand grenade into the functioning of American political media. And when I voted for Bernie Sanders, I was voting to get Flava Flav kicked out of Public Enemy. I gave like $2.50 to the Bernie Sanders campaign in order to get a Fight the Power Bernie Sanders Public Enemy poster. This was the show that got Flava Flav kicked out of Public Enemy. So you know what? At the end of the day, I got exactly what I wanted. So as cynical as I was, I had hope. The Sanders campaign made me feel like, oh, maybe there's a chance we could like get a fairer shake in this society. And I had fallen for the trap. This is the thing. National politics is a religion. It is how we periodize time. We periodize our history according to presidential administrations. It is how people who are essentially powerless, people like me, I can't even get fucking unemployed. I don't even have the power to pay my bills. Okay? Like, it is the way that we feel like we have some buy-in to the highest levels of American power. It is the thing that makes us feel like we've got a stake in this entire society, that we are not just ignored, ignominious, proles. We are important because ultimately we can cast this vote, and those votes come to, it's like James said in one of our episodes, it's like, I do believe those votes, they come together and it matters. It matters. Oh, it matters who you vote for, because it means that you are powerful, that you as an American are not just this like pampered slave who's enjoying a standard of living which was reserved for kings in most of human history, but is also, unlike a king, completely superfluous to the function of society at large. You make no decisions which have any consequence. You mean nothing to the larger system as a whole, and when you are snapped out of it, you just cease to exist. You evaporate like rain off hot asphalt, and you may have never existed at all, because all you were at the end of the day is a little pipe through which money passed for a while until it became impossible for money to pass through it, at which point it was thrown in the garbage. But you're not that, as long as you can believe that your vote has value. Now, I'm not saying voting in general is pointless, especially like I think the COVID-19 thing has made people pay a lot closer attention to their state and municipal governments, which is very important. I think that these are scales at which you actually could have an impact in a democratic election. But on the national level, which is where the majority of our time and interest, and my time and interest, like many of yours, goes, especially presidential contests, because presidential contests are these big symbolic, events. At that level, it's really not about anything practical or anything substantial. It's about feeling like you're steering the grand narrative of American history. It's a taste of power for essentially powerless people. And even though I was buying in to fucking American society a little bit more than I was in previous years, even though I had my fucking driver's license and my shitty fucking job and my bus pass, I was essentially, I still am, a powerless person politically. But it felt good to hope for this Sanders thing, to buy into this Sanders thing. And I could look at it, from the perspective of the poker game of fucking, the sport of politics. And I could say he did some very interesting things in the aftermath of 2016. Sanders aligned groups got into the Democratic Party infrastructure. They made some rules changes so that, for example, superdelegates couldn't weigh in on the first round of convention voting. So if Sanders was able to secure the nomination just, based on primary voting, then he would be able to secure the nomination without getting sabotaged by superdelegates. I saw some smart moves on the part of the Sanders campaign. What they did with Latino outreach in terms of doing advertising on radio and stuff like that was really good. And he had a blowout victory in Nevada as a result of it. I could see that, and I could look at it on the tactical level, and I could say this thing might work. And at this point, when you're feeling that hope, I'm not really examining whether he's going to be able to enact any of these policy positions. I'm not even really thinking about whether he can beat Trump or not, because up until COVID started, I really thought it was an outside chance that any Democrat would beat Trump, because Trump is, an incredible campaigner. He's the greatest political campaigner in modern American history. He's very fucking difficult to defeat. And even with the, complete economic meltdown that we're looking at now, I don't think it's 100% that Joe Biden beats him, or whoever the Democrats end up putting up. Because, maybe they'll just slide somebody else in. Maybe it's HRC. HRC 2020, baby. This is our year. So I bought in. Supporting a presidential candidate, any presidential candidate, was just like getting a driver's license. It was just like paying taxes. It was just like doing a job. An above the books job, I should say. I got my citizenship back in this society, and it just felt like the right thing to do to buy in, because I didn't want to be cynical. I didn't want to just talk about how this is all fucked. I didn't want to talk about how the true governing power of our society is corporations, that they're the ones that are, these stupid Lovecraftian idiot god entities are actually the ones making decisions that affect our day-to-day lives. I didn't want to talk about the presidency as being an empty office. I didn't want to say that no matter who won, it's always going to be HRC. Because that was a very easy position for me to take when I had no buy-in to the society around me. But once I started having to interact and reintegrate with fucking normal people, it became basically a prerequisite. And so, yeah, I supported Bernie Sanders. It was the thing to do in that moment, in that time. And see, this is the interesting thing, is I've gotten a lot of clarity out of this, because it's very difficult, especially if you're a person who came of age, sort of in that weird if you're a millennial, like a person in my generation, and you came of age in that weird transitional time between 20th century media and the internet. There probably isn't a word for what you are trying to do with your life yet, because you've built your idea of yourself, especially, you're a creative person. You want to make work and broadcast it to the world. You want to communicate with people, large amounts of people. You have built your idea of what your project is in a world where the projects available and the institutions supporting them are in a constant state of flux. So I went to graduate school for religious studies, which is basically the sociology of religion. That's the scientific or quote-unquote objective study of religions. I actually prefer the sort of academic-y term cosmography, which if you've been following my channel, you've been reading HRC 2020, you've seen me talk about that. But a cosmography is basically a more generalized word for religion, because I'm not just talking about the Catholic Church here. I'm talking about all the institutions and cultural forces which shape our view of the world outside of our direct sensory experience. That's a very big subject. And, in the past, it maybe would have been more tightly controlled by church. There would have been a greater link between government and church, that kind of thing. But right now we live in a very complex, very diffuse society, and you're receiving information, cosmographic information about what happened before you were born, what's going to happen after you die, what the purpose of your life is, all these sort of big religious cosmic questions. You're receiving that information from a number of different spaces. You're receiving the social orientation that, churches and religion typically provide from a number of different places. You're having communal worship experiences in movie theaters. You're receiving moral instruction from late night talk shows. You're surrounded by preachers. You're surrounded by all of these sort of deconstructed religious elements that are all, diffused around you into this massive marketplace of cosmographies. And that's what I wanted to study. When I started really reading William James and the Marcel Gauchet and these religious studies people that I got really into, Mary Douglas is an anthropologist, I started to realize this was a frame that you could use to talk about the world that we live in today, and the reason that people inhabit the realities that they inhabit. And it's not just because they receive it from, the Bible. It's because they receive it from the variety of primarily corporately constructed and controlled information sources. And this constructs a number of, very interesting religions whose the clash between them sort of produces our modern political reality. The universal thing about American political religion is that we have to believe that this vote validates us, that this vote is an expression of power. Now, I do believe that voting is an expression of power, especially the less people that are participating, the more value your vote has. So state and municipal elections, I do think that there is a better case to be made that you can exert pressure on your government through the ballot box. But on a national level, I would say that the individual vote is not so much an expression of power as an expression of identity, as an expression of affiliation. And you see this very, like, vote blue no matter who. That is a clear statement of this is not about policy. This is not about anything other than tribalism. And that was, the refrain of the Democratic establishment and a number of Democratic voters all throughout this campaign. The thing that you're voting for, if you're voting for Sanders, like I went out and voted for Sanders, and I think the reason that I did it is because I was voting for the idea that on a national level, policy still matters. And the fact that I agreed with Sanders' policies is kind of to the side of it. Like, I wasn't convinced by these candidates who were essentially just saying that this was about something nebulous, like Joe Biden's redeeming the soul of America. This was about discrete political gains that I wanted to make. And because I'm a younger person, because I get my information from the internet, I can construct my political identity according to those policies, which I have been made aware of. I do think that the power on the national level, though, rests more with the people who determine what information is available to you than it does with the individual votes. So Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee now, and I think that Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee to a large degree because the people who voted for him, who are mostly older, who are the primary audience of television today. If you want more information on that, you can read HRC 2020 Part 2, where I break it down. That's on encyclopedia.zone. That was our previous update for the Quarantine Fun Zone. For them, they're not necessarily hearing as much about Sanders' policy positions. They're seeing a very different picture of Bernie Sanders. When I talk to my father, who gets a lot of his information from TV about Bernie Sanders, all he would talk about is how angry he is and how he's not really a Democrat and, all these things, which to me seemed like, old hat and bizarre because I'm participating in a different information stream. According to his information stream, voting for Bernie Sanders is essentially an act of treason. And according to my information stream, voting for Joe Biden is an act of idiocy. But what we're really expressing here is the cosmographies that we occupy. We are not necessarily exerting power over our political system. We are asserting identity within the cosmographical structure which exists for us to exert our identity. And, Joe Biden has adopted some Sanders policies in the aftermath of the Sanders campaign collapsing. He has lowered Medicare enrollment from 65 to 60. He's proposing to do that anyway, which is Hillary Clinton even was going to lower Medicare enrollment to 50. That was her proposal. So he's to the right of Hillary Clinton on this. He's talking about eliminating student debt according to certain income thresholds for people that went to state schools, which, it's a very, very, very minor concession. It doesn't fucking matter. The policy doesn't fucking matter. And, I saw this in a story by Shane Goldmacher and Cindy Ember, which went up on the 9th of April in the New York Times. It's called Biden Seeking Democratic Unity Reaches Left Towards Sanders Ideas, which is a total fucking lie. But there's a quote by a Democratic pollster named Peter Hart, who said, "The galvanizing force in 2020 is Donald Trump. Unity is not a problem, because the hatred and fear of Donald Trump is more important than any single issue position which may divide the Sanders forces from the Biden forces." Essentially, policy doesn't matter. This is all about the repudiation of Trump. And because Trump has been portrayed in media as a historic threat, an existential threat to the existence of American civilization as a whole, it doesn't matter who's at the front. It doesn't matter what they're saying. The policy doesn't matter. It's all about aesthetics. It's literally about getting Donald Trump off of television and replacing him with the blue name. Blue name, good. Red name, bad. That's what we've come to. I mean, that's what it is. And, I knew that in 2016, but by 2020, when I was a little bit more, bought into society, I felt like it was necessary to hope. I felt like it was necessary to believe in this process, at least on some level. Now, Jay Jacobs, the chair of the New York Democrats, was quoted in the same story. And he said, "I challenge anyone to remember anything about any platform in any year by any party. Nobody follows the platform." Essentially, even if Sanders is able to get as many delegates as he wants, exert all the leverage that he wants to exert on Joe Biden, it's not going to matter because policy doesn't matter. Policy doesn't matter. That's the statement from the top of the Democratic Party here. Anytime you see one of these arguments and, or these postmortems, these stories about, well, what could have Sanders done? What could Sanders have done? How could he have won? If he'd just done this, if this had happened in South Carolina rather than this, if this had happened in Super Tuesday, if Elizabeth Warren hadn't dropped out. This is essentially people saying, yes, my guy lost. Yes, there's, Medicare for all has been repudiated. Yes, we're probably going to get another administration that's just fucking the labor unions in the ass. Yes, but if this had just happened or this had just happened, then it could have all gone differently. They're essentially validating the power of the national democratic system. They're defending the power of voting because they have to. Because the alternative, if you want to say it doesn't matter, if you want to say, as the many Democrats are saying at the top of the party infrastructure are saying in the aftermath of Bernie's defeat, that policy does not matter at all, that it's entirely about factionalism, it's entirely about tribalism, then that's a very depressing thing. Because essentially we're spending all this time focused on something that is meaningless. We have no power on this level in this way. And that's something that that's a Rubicon people won't allow themselves to cross. Although I think that a lot of Sanders voters have been forced to cross that Rubicon in the aftermath of his defeat. You shouldn't ask yourself what Bernie could have done differently. You should ask yourself, why am I so focused on this? What am I actually doing? What does this behavior mean to me? Because if it's not about policy, it's about something else. And what exactly that something else is, the subject of a lifetime of research. But for myself, just speaking personally, and say that, up until very recently, I was comfortably ensconced in the lower echelons of American society. Now the lower echelons of American society have been paralyzed by law as a result of the COVID thing. I'm not sure what it's going to look like when we start to reopen, when things start to revivify. I'm not sure what's going to be left. But I have gotten some clarity out of this Sanders thing because obviously, I'm making a whole video of coping with the loss of Bernie Sanders. It is something that I don't enjoy. I don't enjoy being disillusioned like this. But this has happened to me again and again and again and again. And like I said, it's related to what my project, my creative project, my project in media is. I am a sociologist of religion, but I'm a gonzo sociologist. This is what I've done again and again and again. This is what I did during the Trump campaign, where I occupied that ideological space. And then once the campaign was over, once he won, I moved away from it and started critiquing it. I worked with Sam Hyde, who's the biggest internet troll in the world. I went and got into his fucking videos because I wanted to see what that world was about. I go into these spaces, I go into these ideologies, and I cross the Rubicon of belief. I get into their center, and then I write about what the experience is, and then I come out of it, and I have, the experience of having been inside. It's gonzo sociology. It's not looking at these things from the outside, from a scholarly remove. It's allowing yourself to be enraptured in this system of belief so that you can observe it truly, and you can get some very interesting information out of it. That's what I'm doing, gonzo sociology. And so from that perspective, I did get exactly what I wanted out of the Bernie Sanders thing. I got to taste that sweet, sweet pain of realizing that on a national level, politics is not policy. It's not even remotely related to policy. On a national level, this is something else. And it's going to be very interesting explicating what that is over the next, year. I'm not really interested. Like, who's going to win in the fall? Who knows? We don't even know if they're going to have a fucking convention. Like, they might have a virtual convention. What the fuck is that? That's never happened before. What's going to happen in the fall? I don't know. It doesn't matter. In terms of like actual differences that I see between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is way more entertaining. That's kind of it. But I'm not interested in going out and risking getting a deadly lung infection standing in line to vote in order to change the TV channel. I don't even fucking watch TV. I don't even have a fucking television. I don't have like fucking cable or broadcast TV. I use my television to watch Blu-rays of Japanese cult movies. And that is something that I still feel that I have some control over. Because, you know what? I'm not a citizen. I'm going to be honest. I'm a consumer. And that's kind of it. I'm a consumer of political information just like you are, just like everybody else is. And voting is just another consumer behavior in a galaxy of consumer behaviors. So yeah. Bernie Sanders, the audacity of cope. This is the longest and most elaborate cope video that I have ever done. But at the same time, look, feeling disempowered by national politics is not like a new position. I felt this way after Barack Obama was elected. I felt this way in 2004 when Bush got reelected. Being disempowered is kind of my default position in regards to politics. But for whatever reason this year, I just felt like engaging in that belief. I felt compelled to engage in that hope. And it was because of where I was in my life. It was because of the people around me. And it was because of social pressure, informational pressure. It's never just a pure matter of will. What thing you end up going into, what cosmography you find yourself espousing. But you have to be able to recognize when your faith has collapsed. And you have to be able to carry something out of it, to bring some kind of observation into the future, and to be able to make good work out of that observation. And, the best observation that I've gotten out of this whole thing is here's an example of this. People like to do these sort of saucy tweets. I do these tweets too, where they point out that, for example, Joe Biden was treated very differently in regards to his sexual assault allegation than Brett Kavanaugh was, or than Bernie Sanders was when Elizabeth Warren said that he told her that a woman would never be president. You point out these little media double standards, that Yahoo News reported on the sexual assault allegations against Joe Biden and then moved it into their sports section and then deleted it completely. That Joe Biden has still not been asked about the sexual assault allegations leveled against him by Tara Reid, but Bernie Sanders was, weirdly, in his press push after he officially stepped down and endorsed Biden. You point out these little double standards, and it's like, whoa, look, the corporatist media is like, oh man, I found a little bit of bias there, which this is a lot like the fucking what could Bernie have done wrong, the Bernie postmortem thing, because essentially what you're saying is these people do want to be objective, but you're pointing out when they're not, and you're shaming them towards greater objectivity. But what's the point? Because we all know at this point, corporatist media defends its own. It's got its own set of priorities. It's not about giving people the unvarnished truth. It's about creating a particular spectrum of realities that, allow people to choose between, orange corporatism or grape corporatism. So yeah, of course they have a double standard. Of course that's how they're going to report shit. Of course it's all fucked. Pointing it out is useless. But think about the opportunity there. Because if the larger media organizations are not providing people with information about something as explosive as sexual assault allegations against the Democratic nominee for president, that's a tremendous opening for independent media to cover that story that people are really going to want to hear a lot about. They left that on the table for you. If Bernie Sanders, you put all this hope and all this energy and all this dedication towards the Sanders campaign because you're in favor of workers' rights, because you want Medicare for all, blah, 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 blah. You're putting all of this energy and dedication into a system that will not reward you, into a system that is fixed, and not just fixed because the party is fucking with Bernie and, what happened in Iowa and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's fixed because the people that are actually voting, the majority of people that are voting, these older people, they live in a very narrow band of reality that makes their behaviors very controllable and extremely predictable. You are pouring your time and your effort as an advocate for progressive change into this unproductive field. I think that the loss of Bernie Sanders makes the possibility of a general strike or, just a wave of strikes and labor protests across the country much more possible, because that energy, that, rightful indignation that people have at being mistreated at the lower end of American society is going to have to find an outlet other than electoralism. And based on the evidence of my entire fucking life, at a national level, electoral politics are not an effective venue for change. So now, think about what they have given you. They have given you all of this time, all of this energy, all of this power has been vacated from the place where it can sort of safely be channeled and keep everything functioning as it was. Now, a lot of things are on the table that were not on the table before. And that's an opportunity. That's not a defeat. Although, of course, it is a defeat for Bernie Sanders. Michael Tracy likes to make this point. Michael Tracy is an independent journalist that I like quite a bit. And he makes this point that if Bernie Sanders was 100% always going to be defeated by the quote-unquote Democratic establishment, then there was no point in voting for him, because they wouldn't allow anybody who was an actual existential threat to them to, get onto the ballot. And I think his behavior since dropping out proves that Bernie Sanders himself was never an existential threat to the Democratic establishment. What Michael Tracy says, though, is there was no element of his movement that was an existential threat to the Democratic power structure. And I don't agree with that, because I think the thing that was an existential threat is in that fundraising, that Bernie Sanders was able to get a movement of millions of people together, and he was able to capitalize that movement to get a massive amount of resources together to mount this campaign. Now, he's proven that these ideas, that advocating for sort of slightly more socialist FDR-style policies is something that's capable of raising a large amount of money. That means that these are ideas that are capable of organizing mass action. And serious action, because people are actually putting their money where their mouth is in regards to these ideas. People see them as vitally important to their lives. That is the existential threat, not old cuck Barney Sanders here. Because this motherfucker is going to go retire to Vermont with his wood-burning stove, and he's going to have a stroke in 3 years, and Barack Obama is going to be real sad because now everybody's his friend. But fuck him. Fuck Bernie Sanders. To hell with it. The Bernie Sanders movement, though, there's something there. So this has been a long, rambling one. Thank you for putting up with it. But, we all got to get the cope out one of these days. And once again, go to encyclopedia.zone. Check out the Quarantine Fun Zone update, which is available now. And if you like what we're doing, you can support us at HRC 2020 on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HRC 2020. And thank you so much to the people that are already supporting the Patreon. You're literally buying me food. So thank you very much. Everybody have a great fucking week. We'll see you very soon on encyclopedia.zone.